to another episode of I Love Data Fridays here at the International Data Evaluation Center on the campuses of the Ohio State University. And ladies and gentlemen, good to see you again, and welcome to episode 46 of I Love Data Fridays. Today, we will be talking about our annual reports update for the 2019-20 school year, and specifically, we'll be addressing changes for our university trainers and our teacher leaders. But before we get into that, hey, who's talking data to you? Well, of course, you've got me, Jeff Breimer-Bashore, Director and Co-Principal Investigator here at the International Data Evaluation Center. And before we get into our agenda, I just want you to know that today we're going to be focusing on the changes in the reports. So we're going to talk about individual changes to tables, some new additions, and we will also include some talk about some changes that will help account for school closures this year, but we won't be specifically demonstrating how to talk about your data today. We're going to be saving that discussion for the fall when we all come back in. So it's on the radar, but it's just not for today. So here is our agenda. First, we're going to do a quick overview of the IDEC reports and how they're sort of layered and the issues that they address. Then we're going to get into the changes of the reports this year for our sites, districts, and our universities. And then finally, this last part will be for our new teacher leaders, though you're all welcome to stay around and listen. But we're going to talk about what you get as a part of your annual reports every year from IDEC. All right, let's get to it and let's talk a little data.
I love Data Friday!
So our first topic is going to be sort of the layering of the IDEC reports and how we can use them to troubleshoot certain types of issues in our data. So the first thing you need to know is that the IDEC reports are like onions. And like I've been saying, it means that the reports are come in layers. The different types of reports that come back from IDEC, of course, we have our site level reports, our district level reports, our school level reports, and then we even have some teacher level on demand reports. And so it's these types of these reporting levels that sort of make up our reporting onion, our onion layers. So we've got our different layers there. So in general, the upper layers of our onions, the site reports and down to our school reports a little bit, can help highlight or show or reveal sort of systemic problems within your data. They may not tell you specifically which teachers or students, but as systemic problems are happening, the results of those issues appear in your data in those reports. So we can use these levels, layers of reports to help highlight these systemic issues. Then once we get down to school level reports and below and down to our teacher level reports, we can start locating the individual student level problems or even instructional problems. Then we can start using our reports to help inform ourselves about how down here at this level, at the school and teacher level, how we're going to address individual changes to lessons. We can then use our school and districts and site level reports to help us think about ways and strategize how we're going to address systemic issues. And when we start doing that, we should start seeing changes in the overall results of our data. Okay, we're going to move on now to the actual updates to our reports this year, and we are going to be starting with the executive summary. So currently, as teacher leaders, you receive an executive summary for your site and one for each of your school districts. And this year, not only are we doing site and school districts, but we're also producing executive summaries for our universities. So this is new for our university training centers. Now, the executive summary, what we've changed this year is we've shortened it from 2 pages to a 1-page document to make it a little shorter, a little more concise, and with just some relevant information on the front. And basically, we've removed a lot of some of the written text that has been in previous versions. You will find in there that the report itself has 3 tables that answer the following questions. Who was served? And it includes who was served by certain student subgroup categories. And then we go on to answer what were the outcomes. And once again, we highlight the outcomes not only for all, but also some student subgroup categories. And then finally, we analyze the growth on text level and writing vocabulary. So let's go ahead and take a look at an example Okay, so here is a full page view of the executive summary. As you can see, like we said, we've got it down to one page. You can see the three tables listed out on here. Now, I'm just going to zoom in a little bit here. You'll have at the top, we just have some descriptive text of what reading recovery is. Then we move right into the data. So, table number one talks about the children served. The first row shows the count and percentage of all the children served, so that'll always be 100%. Then it shows the count of students that had free and reduced lunch and the percentage that that represents out of the total number of students. So in this example, this 92 students is 48.7% of the 189 students at the top here. Then we have a subsection under here for a breakdown by different race ethnicities. Once again, we show the count of students in those categories and then what percentage out of the total 189, at least in this example, 189, what it represents at the top. And then we finally have a last row for the count of English learner students in your site or school district or UTC and what percentage that represents. Down in table number two, we show the outcome for our students. So this table shows outcome for our discontinued students, and these are students who are reached average levels. And then our student recommended students, they made progress but didn't reach average levels. Once again, we have the first row is just all students served. So in this example, we can see that 140 students were discontinued, 12 were recommended, that 140 represents 92.1% of the total population. So, if once again, that 189 students. And then we have a breakdown of the discontinued and recommendeds by the same student subgroups that you have above in table one. So we see our free and reduced lunch, another section for our different race ethnicity groups, and then a final row for our English learner students. So finally, in table number three here, we're looking at the growth on text level and writing vocabulary. And specifically, as you see in the title here, it's for students who entered in the fall and reached average performance of the class. So our first round discontinued students, and you see that it says it's compared to the typical first grader. So this would be the typical, this is our random sample, and it is using the national random sample. So let's take a quick look. Now, you'll see that the table is sort of divided into two sections, one reporting results for text reading level and another section reporting results for writing vocabulary. In each section, you'll see that you have the reading recovery scores on that assessment, and then the typical first grader or the random sample comparison on the second row. You will see at the bottom of the table that it notes that the typical first grader is a random sample of 2,085 first grade students from the entire United States. So this is how we know it's a national random sample, and it actually lets somebody reading it know the size of the random sample. It gives scores at fall, mid-year, and now you're noticing at year end that it's blank. In this example, we're using some data from the 2019-20 school year, and we specifically programmed it since we're probably not going to have a lot of mid-year data to not put in the mid-year data. Normally, you would have the fall to year end gain, so the difference from this column to this column in here as well. But in this example, we're just showing how this year it will exclude, or how it will skip over computing that fall to year end gain, since we're not going to have that mid year data. At the end of the report, you will see that it will print the primary contact's teacher leader's name, address, phone number, and email, and it will print the site coordinator's names, address, phone number, and email as well. Also, in case you didn't see it, the report also displays the What's Worked Clearinghouse and the ESSA Strong Evidence logos at the bottom. If we switch back over and take a look at that, you can see down here at the bottom right-hand corner, we have those logos as at the bottom as well. And you'll get one report for both reading recovery and DLL. All right, next up, I want to tell you about some new tables that you're going to find in your site reports, the district reports, and even our university reports. And these new tables have been designed in such a way that they allow you to take the temperature of your data. So to get a sense of what's going on with an implementation of reading recovery. And these new tables will be located at the start of your report, and they have a section title that says 2019 20 reading recovery summary for, and then the name of your implementation. So you'll find them at the very beginning of your report. What's different about these tables is that these tables, in some cases, have taken data from multiple tables that are already in the report, but have combined them into one single table, so you don't have to go hunting for them in multiple places. And some of the tables compare your results to national data. So sometimes it's nice to have an idea of like how close am I to what's happening nationally? How different or how the same are my data? Also, these tables are designed to cause questions and to be used alongside your student data summary on demand report. So, as I was saying earlier, they aren't meant to reveal individual student uh, uh, problems or instructional problems. They're meant to actually just highlight issues and grab your attention. And then you can start using the student data summary to sort of start tracking down the problem and explore what's going on. If you want to see how to do that, go back to episode 45 back in March of I Love Data Fridays. And in that episode, Laurel Dickey and I do this exact exercise with these new tables and the student data summary and track down issues in data. These new tables will be both for reading recovery and DLL reports. Now, let's take a look at an example. All right, so we've got an example site report open up here, and we are going to scroll down. And like I said, this new section appears right after the table of contents. So we hear that title, that summary title right here. So let's look at this first table, students served. So this data will look kind of familiar to you. It's got 5 rows, one for each end of program status here. And for each end of program status, we have the count and what percentage that represents. So, for example, in this sample data, 140 students were discontinued, and that represents 74% of the total students that were served out of this 189. So, this is data that you would find in table 2.1 or in figure 2.1. But the difference is that it puts the national percentage also right next to it. So you can kind of just eyeball back and forth how similar or different I am from the national data. This next table takes a look at average weeks and lessons per week. And it does it for 2 groups of students. It looks at it for first round students, this first section here, and second round students, this second section here. And it breaks it down by different end of program statuses. So for first round students, it'll look at discontinued, recommended, and none of above students. And for our second round students, it'll look at discontinued, incomplete, recommended, and none of above. So for each of these rows, we can see the average number of weeks it takes to get through the lessons, how many lessons per week children were getting. And then over here, you could compare that to what's going on nationally. So we have nationally the number of lessons per week, and then nationally nationally the number of average number of lessons that children get, and then nationally the number of weeks per lessons per week. So, for example, in this report, we can see in this sample data that our first round discontinued students were in their lessons for an average of 17.8 weeks. They were getting about 3.6 lessons per week. Nationally, we see that average is up at about 18 and a half total weeks in lessons, and they were kids usually getting about 3.7 lessons per week. So that's that table. All right, next one. Now this should look a little familiar. This is a just sort of a remake of Figure 5.1, but with the addition of some lines. So we're showing data for first round students, second round students, and random sample students. So the data for our first round students are any lines that are in blue. So you'll see a solid blue square and then a slightly lighter blue square with a dashed line. So the solid line and solid blue square are data for your first round discontinued students. And the dashed and lighter or blue lines are data nationally for first round discontinued students. So you can compare how your data are similar or different. Similarly, with our second round students, we have our solid red triangle line is your second round students, and then the sort of shaded one there with the triangle, but with the dashed line is national second round students. So it's a little easier to see here on this chart that this site's second round students are a little different than what we would typically see for second round students. They may come in at the same place, but it looks like they don't quite make as much growth as they wait for reading recovery. But once they do get the intervention, then they accelerate and make that accelerated growth that we expect to see. And though they do finish slightly lower than what we would see in the typical second round student, but it's not a big difference. So, second round students nationally usually finish the year at 19.5. In this example, they're finishing it around at 18.5. And then finally, our black line with the circles, that's the national random sample. So, we're trying to see how similar your solid lines are to the dash lines. Do they have a similar shape? Do they? You can see that in this example that the blue squares pretty much overlap each other. That this implementation student data kind of looks like the typical reading recovery student. So it's hard to see the difference between the two lines there. It implies that there's not much difference. All right, moving on to the next table that's brand new. So now we're going to look at the count of students by their year-end text level and intervention status. Now, this table may not be as useful for this year because we're going to have a lot of missing data this year. But I wanted to talk about this table anyways. But you can see that there in this table, we actually show data for just three of the intervention statuses. We're only showing data for discontinued, recommended, and incompletes. And then along the top here, we have our different text reading levels. So we're starting at 5 or below, and then we have our different text reading levels going to all the way up to 20 and above. And then you can see how many students at the end of the school year fell into these categories. So, though not showing in these data, we would be surprised if we saw, say, I'm just going to change that real quick. If we saw two students who were discontinued but then ended the year at a text level 6, that should raise some flags, right? And we can start investigating our data a little more. So, this is one way to sort of now start thinking about who or what do I need to investigate in my student data summary. All right, moving on to I believe this is our final new table in the reports. So now we come to a table that shows the count of recommended students by different text level scenarios. So this first line shows a count of recommended students that when they were recommended at a 5 or below at midyear. And in this example, there were 0 of them. Next, we look at the count of students that were recommended between 6 and 9 at midyear. Third row is between 10 and 12 at midyear. And then the last row is a little different. It's looking at kids who were recommended at a 9 or below at midyear, but then reach 12, at least a 12, by the end of the school year. All right, so there you go. These are our new tables that are appearing in our reports this year. Okay, so next, we wanted to talk about some new tables that are specifically have been changed for this year because all of the school closures that we have. And these new tables for about the school closures affect the site, district, and university reports. So we're adding a new table 2.1b and a figure 2.1b. And specifically, these tables are going to look exactly like their counterparts, meaning table 2.1b looks exactly like table 2.1 and figure 2.1b looks exactly like figure 2.1. But in the B tables, they will exclude your none of above students who interventions were stopped because of school closures. So teachers who selected on the exit page that there were none of above because of a long or short-term school closure, it will exclude those students from those calculations in there. And this will be in both the reading recovery and DLL reports. So let's go ahead and take a look at these tables. All right, so we're down here to table 2.1. Now, for as the recording of this video, everybody, I didn't have we couldn't run an exact what it's going to look like because we don't have all the data in yet to start running the reports. But you will see table 2.1 first, and then a table 2.1b, and it will be in this none of above column. That if there are, um, you know, where You will see all of the none of above students in this first table 2.1, and all of the percentages will be calculated using all of the none of above students. And then table 2.1b will exclude the students who had that marking of school closure. And you can see it specifically states in the title, excluding students whose interventions were interrupted by school closure. And the percentages will be calculated excluding the school closure students. And then figure 2.1 and will stay the same, and then 2.1b will look very similar, but once again, it will exclude students whose interventions were interrupted by school closure. So your none of above will the yellow area will change. Well, everything will shift a little bit. So just look at the name. It's either figure 2.1 or 2.b that will be in your reports. Okay, teacher leaders. So we have a new updated report design for your site reports. So you'll remember in the past, your site reports had not only the figures and the tables in there, but they also had like some explanatory text interwoven in between the tables and figures. And this year we've gone ahead. So, as I said, the reports contain that explanatory text. But this year we've gone ahead and removed that explanatory text. And all you will find in the table, your site reports this year, is just the tables and figures. So it will look very similar to this sample report. So in this report, you can see we've got our title page, our table of contents, and then the new tables that I just showed you guys. But then it goes right into the tables and the charts, and it doesn't have any explanatory text intermingled with it. It is just the tables and the data, so you can really get down to that data a little easier. So, as I talked about this with the IDEC Advisory Committee and some other teacher leaders, some of you told me that, sometimes the explanatory text actually helps explain what is in the tables and helps you figure out what the tables are trying to say. So we didn't leave you high and dry. We've added a new downloadable document this year on the IDEC website, the 2019-20 Guide to Tables and Figures in the Annual Reports. So if you go over to the IDEC website and then come on over to our publications page, in the evaluation reports section, you'll find the 2019-20 Guide to the Tables and Figures in the Annual Reports. And I'm going to go ahead and download it. I'm going to open it up. And as you can see here, we've got our title page. We've got our table of contents. So it talks, you can go through and read about this guide and the different parts of the guide. One of the things it provides is a quick explanation of all the types of reports that IDEC produces, from the university reports all the way down to our school reports. Then we, in the table of contents, have the different tables and figures you would find in your report. So if you say have a question about table 1.1, in your report, you could come over like an RR or DLL table 1.1. You could come over here, click on that, and read about the table. We also have a section in here for the disaggregated reports, both the RR and the DLL. And we also have a section for the literacy lessons reports. So once we get past about the guide, what is this guide? The guide has a description of the reports all in here. And we finally get down to where it starts talking about the tables, and it just has brief explanations about what each table is providing to you and some possible ways to talk about the data. So this replaces that narrative text that used to be in your site report. And you will see these changes for both reading recovery and the DLL reports this year. This design change doesn't affect your district reports or university reports, as those reports actually never contain any of that narrative text in them. Okay, I'm going to wrap up here the discussion about all of our changes to the annual report. So I just kind of wanted to remind everyone of three things here. Remember, your annual reports are Word documents, and specifically for our new teacher leaders, what I'm telling you is that these reports are editable. You can cut and paste, you can remove. They really are meant to be source documents for you to create other publications that you want to make for administrators or other stakeholders. And you can change them, update them. And also, remember, IDEC has to produce like a standard report that tries to work for everybody, but every implementation is different. So not every table that you see in the reports is going to be or will have meaningful data for you to use. And that's okay. That's normal. So one of the things you have to do is go through and figure out, what is meaningful for me this year. All right. So now we're done with our reports update and we're going to move on to our section where we talk about what sites and teacher leaders get every year from IDEC and their annual reports. It's really a section designed for new teacher leaders, but our veteran teacher leaders, if you want to stick with us, please do. And let's move on. Okay, for those who stuck around, just a quick reminder of something we discussed at the beginning of today's episode. Remember, IDEC reports are like onions, and as we go through the different types of reports that you're going to get from IDEC on an annual basis, having this concept firmly in your mind will help you understand like where I can use reports to solve different specific problems. So remember, we said that IDEC reports are like onions. They come in layers. So we have different layers of reports. We have our site reports, our district level reports, school level reports, and we even have some teacher level reports. And it's these different reports that make up the different layers of the IDEC reporting onion, okay? And as we said earlier, that our upper layers, down to about the school reports, help us highlight or find systemic issues in our data. So we're not talking about the issues where it's like an individual lesson or a teacher. If something broader is going on, these reports tend to show that or highlight those issues. Then down here at the bottom, at our lower levels of our layers of our onions, this is where we can start actually looking for and locating sort of instructional or student level problems. Then, knowing this information, we can start talking about making changes maybe to individual lessons and implementations. We can work with districts and schools and and to start addressing these systemic issues, and then we should start seeing changes in our overall results. Okay, for our discussion today about what you get from IDEC as a part of your annual reports, I'm going to go back to um, our new guide on the to our question. I'm sorry, a guide to our tables and figures for this year because it actually does a great job sort of explaining what you get from IDEC and what it contains. So teacher leaders, you are going to get at the end of the school year when you submit data, you're going to get a reading recovery set of reports. If your site has DLL, you will also get a DLL set of reports. And these reports are designed to answer sort of five core research questions, which are outlined right here in our guide to our figures and tables document. They are also designed to answer four more supplemental research questions, which are also outlined in the guides and figures document right here. Next, if you have literacy lessons in your site, you will also get a set of literacy lessons reports as well. So, and these literacy lessons reports are designed to answer these four basic research questions right now. All right, so let me scroll down a little bit more here. So now we get to talk about the types of reports provided by IDEC. So, all right, so since I'm focusing on teacher leaders here, I'm going to skip over the types of UTC or university reports, and we're going to scroll down to the section where we talk about our site reports. So, like I said, for sites, you're going to get one standard report for reading recovery, DLL, and literacy lessons that are designed to answer those research questions that we talked about above. And these reports are Word documents that you will be able to download and use them to sort of troubleshoot and also make other reports that you want to make for stakeholders. You're also going to get what's called an executive summary for your entire site. So if you have more than one district, all your district's data will be in this site executive summary. You'll remember earlier in this video that executive summary is a one-page document that's meant to be its intended audience, as you can see here, is for school district administrators, and the language uses as little jargon as possible in there. So this is like something you could probably take unedited and just slap down in front of someone if you needed to. The next set of documents that you'll get are site documents that we call our alternate disaggregated tables. So this table, these set of tables take the results that you would find in your standard or your standard site reports and break them down by different subgroups, and these subgroups are listed out right here. So for table, if you had a table 1.1 in your report, you would find a let's see, if we wanted to see table 1.1 broken down by race ethnicity, you would go to table 1.1, I think it's point 2 in your disaggregated report to find that. Then you'll finally get a site data dump that contains all, you actually get two data dumps. One data dump that contains your reading recovery and DLL data together, and then a second data dump if you have literacy lessons that will contain your literacy lessons students, and it comes in an Excel file. And if you want, this can be provided to school district officials. Then you're going to get a set of reading recovery, and if you have a DLL system summary reports, and you'll get one for each of your school districts. So they'll look very similar to your site reports. They have similar tables in it. The next thing that we're going to get is what we call our district, and you'll get it if you have reading recovery, you'll get a reading recovery executive summary, district executive summary, and if you have DLL, you'll get a DLL executive summary. So that's that one-page report that we were talking about, but this time you'll get one for each of your school districts being served in reading recovery. If you need to go a little deeper in your data, or you actually want a data dump for your site, you can order a full district report with disaggregated tables and a data dump for $75. That's just extra, and you can contact the help desk and we can get that for you. And then finally, what we're going to provide you then is for your schools, if you have reading recovery, you'll get a reading recovery school data summary. For your DLL schools, you'll get a separate DLL data summary. And then if you have literacy lessons, you will get a separate literacy lessons data summary for all of your literacy lesson schools. Now, just keep in mind that specifically these data summaries down at the school level actually sometimes contain student names and other personally identifiable information, so they are not meant to be used in a public format, or they are not intended for publication, but they are meant to be used by literacy teams to inform sort of that data-driven decision making. All right, and then once you get past that explanation about the different types of reports, you can come down and read about the different tables that you will find in your reports. So, for example, if I go back to my site report, and I'm just going to pick a table here, we'll just scroll down. Let's look at table 3. I want to look at table 3.1, progress on text reading level. What is table 3.1? Okay, let's go back to our guide to tables. Let's see. I'm going to go back up to the table of contents. We were looking in this happens to be a sample site report, and it's for reading recovery, so it's not a literacy lessons. So I wanted table 3.1. All right, so tables 3.1 through 3.7 are here. So you can see that it contains an explanation of what you are going to find in tables 3.1 and 3.7 right there, and help you figure out what these tables are trying to say to you. All right, that's it. Woo! All right, data lovers, that concludes our episode of I Love Data Fridays today, our annual reports update. That was a lot of material to get through. Thank you for waiting it out all the way to the end. Hey, if you haven't subscribed to our channel, go ahead and mash that subscribe button right there so you can get all the notifications from IDEC, including our any new episodes of I Love Data Fridays. And I'm going to go ahead and cue the outro music here. And I'm going to say, hey, data lovers, thank you for watching another I Love Data Fridays here at the International Data Evaluation Center. So good to have you. And hey, we will talk data to you later.